DME providers who supply and service CPAPs have experienced significant backlog with CPAPs, in part due to the supply chain issues, but also recalls and staff shortages. Now, if you are listening to this podcast today, the likelihood is that this has impacted your business, not to mention the patients and also the referral community which you serve. Today, with the help of two industry experts, we will look at this more objectively and provide some solutions that will move you and your business forward. Hello, friends. This is Coach Bello, and I'm grateful to be with all of you today, and I'm honored to have joining our conversation Zach Gantt, Chief Executive Officer, and Gregg, Vice President of Sales and Business Development for Encore Health. Welcome back, I should say, both you, Zach and Ray.
Thank you, Ty.
Thank you, Ty.
Hey, folks, before we went live, we even said, this is kind of a short and sweet kind of topic. So this might not be as long as our other podcasts that we have, but it is full of what I think is going to be valuable information for all of you. So, gentlemen, let's kind of get started with this idea. As we've talked about this backlog issue in the intro, and you and I, we've had conversations on the side. We as providers are facing some obstacles. I wonder if you can share what providers may have communicated to you and with their concerns and issues relative to this area.
Thanks, Ty. Well, I would say the word that gets used the most when talking to providers is unprecedented. Providers that we've spoken with are pretty consistent in stating that they have never experienced a recall event of this size, scope, or this duration. It's really an event whose impact has been felt pretty uniformly across the whole industry, really regardless of the size of the DME that we're speaking with. Whether that's conversations with small independents to, your larger regionals, even all the way up to, the handful of national providers that are out there. They all have seemed to have been caught up in this. I'd also add that many providers have expressed to us that particularly in the early days of this recall, they really felt caught in the middle, primarily between their physician prescribers and their patient base. Physicians were calling in, to the DMEs, wanting to know if their new patients would be able to be set up, and then also what the replacement process would be for their existing PAP patients. And at the same time, DMEs were getting called from existing patients, both the historic patients as well as new prospective patients that were about to get set up. They were calling in with really the same sorts of questions. So DMEs in the beginning really we're kind of between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, and it's obviously put the referral community in that tough spot as well, plus the patients, because patients always go back directly to the ones that provided the care to them, i.e. the sleep lab and or the physician. And then it's us, the provider, the DME provider. Zach, from a clinical perspective, not that Ray isn't clinical, he is a clinician, but from your perspective, a clinical perspective, how does this impact those patients that are waiting on their CPAP? They've been prescribed it, and now we've got a recall, we've got staff shortages, et cetera. What does that do to them?
Well, Ty, it puts them in a position where obviously they've got a prescription for something, a therapy that they need, and now they can't get it. And so it's kind of a catch-22 in the sense that the DME has the script in their hands. So they've got some liability in that, but then they can't get the equipment or they don't have the staff to set it up. But we know that sleep apnea at a very severe level can cause death, but it can also cause a lot of other health issues. And so the challenge that the industry faces today is that we've got all these patients who are prescribed therapy. We know they need therapy and they don't have that therapy. And so we're in a position where we are struggling to get therapy to patients because of device shortages, or also the thing you just mentioned, which is staffing shortages. And, that is a big problem. Respiratory therapists, there's a huge shortage of respiratory therapists across the country. A lot of DMEs are trying to figure out other ways to set up PAPs, trying to bring in nurses or sleep techs or non-clinicians, just trying to find a way to get some of those patients set up. And the respiratory therapy shortage is not going to end anytime soon. It's projected to last for the next 20 to 30 years, and it's probably going to get a lot worse than it is today. So we got to figure out ways to be creative.
Yeah, I think that is it, right? We've got this situation where we have to adapt and improvise, and not to steal the Marine Corps' motto, but we do have to adapt and improvise right now. Ray, I want to go back to what we just talked about a little bit ago. The first question that I asked you, a little bit about the referral source and the impact of the patient. But what are some steps? Let's provide some solutions here for the provider that providers might be able to take to mitigate as much of what may be directed as negative impact on them and also on the referral community?
Well, Ty, I think like a lot of things in life, I think it really comes down to ensuring there's really good transparency regarding the process, and that there's also open lines of communication that are established and in place. While we're seeing that replacement efforts for the recalled units are currently ongoing, we're starting to see shipments from other manufacturers. So companies like React Health, ResMed, are starting to increase to meet the backlog demand. Many providers that we speak to are starting to report to us that the supply chain squeeze that they saw earlier this year and even late, last year, it's starting to smooth out a little bit. And so now they can start focus on ways to, effectively and efficiently clear their backlog list of those patients that have unfortunately had to kind of wait on the sidelines for several months. But also, while these DME providers can also start looking about, starting to engage with new orders that are coming in the door.
Yeah, it really is that two-edged sword, right? We've got to care for the ones that we already have in place, plus we have to take care of the new ones that we're getting. And those are continuing to pile up because labs haven't slowed down with patients coming into them. So there's a lot in this dynamic that's going on, a lot of moving pieces, if you will. So let me do this, if you guys don't mind. I'd like to kind of pivot to maybe some internal solutions that you both could advise HME providers that could help them in this situation. What do you think about that, Zach?
Well, I think there's a couple different things. One is that because of the crisis we had with devices, a lot of providers bought devices that weren't connected, and we went back 20 years really in a card to cloud kind of setup, or not having the ability to remotely connect to those devices. And so that is a challenge. And we were in a crisis and we were desperate. And so we saw providers buy devices that maybe weren't the best devices because they didn't have any other options. And so I think going forward, making the right decision around how do you make your business efficient after the setup, because we all know that the setup is just the beginning. After that, we've got to get the patient compliant. And then you've got the resupply piece. And so having compliance and resupply without being connected is a big challenge. And so I think understanding what devices are out there now and which ones are the best ones. But then the other thing is, I think, a lot of the things we're seeing now is things like group setups where you don't have enough staff to set up a patient. And so you'll bring 5 patients in together and do a group setup, get them all to sign off that they're okay with that. That's a very efficient way to do setups. Not every patient's going to agree to it, but I think that is a very good way to be able to help offset the challenge of not having enough staff. When you think about if you could do five patients an hour for a respiratory therapist, you get a lot more patients done. And I also think figuring out ways to be efficient in how you manage the process. Technology is so good now, and we underutilize technology in a lot of ways. But being able to make sure that patients show up and make sure that we're following up with them and make sure that you're connected to them in a lot of different ways, not just by phone. But I think using technology is one of the things that as an industry, we've been slow to adopt sometimes, but there's really good technology out there around PAPs, around compliance and around resupply, being able to tap into that and make sure that your business is ran efficiently.
I agree. I got to witness, I'm out in the field periodically, but I got to witness that group setup just before COVID, and it was dynamic, really, really dynamic. The respiratory therapist was the trainer, educating the folks. Everyone was very engaged. They made a great presentation of it. They kept people active, answered questions. Also, though, they had other products in the room that the patient might want to buy. They had the cleaning devices that were there. They let them know about the resupply, et cetera. So it was really, really well done. And I think more and more providers should consider migrating towards that model, especially with staff shortages today. I think that would be a great model for them. And I love the fact that you brought out the technology piece of it. I hope providers aren't shortchanging themselves on buying the lesser expensive, not as robust technology piece of equipment, because we know what's coming up in the future here, and that is with outcomes data. And we're not looking at box data any longer. We're going to be looking beyond that, but box data is still going to be a part of it. So hopefully that's going to be a thing. That was just my actually 1.5 cents. You guys have more than I do, so I'm just going to give 1.5. All right. So I've known you all for a long time at Encore, and I've always described your business maybe as a great team of both innovators, and also you provide tremendous solutions to the medical community that's out there, as we call HME providers. Now, I know that through the pandemic, you all were on the forefront of delivering solutions to this community. And as you have come alongside of providers with issues of PAP backlog, I know that you have a solution in an offering that you have called PAP 360. Zach, can you share an overview of this offering for our listeners today?
Yeah, so PAP 360 was really birthed because of these problems that we're talking about. Encore traditionally has been in the respiratory space and really focused on ventilation, COPD management, oxygen patients, trying to find solutions to be able to better manage respiratory patients. We've not done a lot in the CPAP world or the sleep world until just recently. And because of the fact that there's this crisis going on, and because we already had a call center spun up with respiratory therapists, we recognize that, hey, there's an opportunity here. But when we do models, Ty, as you know, we don't want to just provide a service. We're looking to provide an outcome, right? And so our goal is not just to provide staff. There's a lot of staffing companies out there, but ours is to be able to provide programs. And so PAP 360 is a full-blown model where you can do anything from contract us just to do your setups, or we can help you with compliance, and then eventually with resupply. And so we're really building out that model using the Nexus software to do those setups, so we can track setups, track the outcomes. But really our goal here is to build a very robust CPAP model, sleep model, to be able to help providers. We already work with a lot of the regional, national providers on the respiratory side. So it just makes sense for us to kind of venture into the sleep world. But it was really born out of necessity that people had a need, our customers had a need. They were coming to us saying, hey, can you help us with this need? And our comment back to them was, well, we can't do it today, but we probably can tomorrow. And so we spun up this model overnight for a customer. And then since then, it's really evolved into a very robust model where we've got quite a few customers that we're working with.
Yeah, and it is. You said it's a great need right now, and way to go. I mean, just way to go. Way to adapt yourselves. You've done a great job with that, and I'm really grateful for you all and all that you've done in serving this industry and serving the patient that they're obviously entrusted to care for. You take on that same trust level, don't you? So now, how does a provider get a hold of you to talk a little bit more about PAP 360 and maybe actually enroll in PAP 360 for themselves and their team? Ray, could you give us some information on that?
Yeah, certainly. So there's a couple different ways. So if they go to our website, encorehc.com, there at the bottom of the main page will be a request a demo link that they can click on and just fill out some basic information, and we can get back in touch with them. Or if they want, they can just email me directly at rgregg, that's Gregg, at encorehc.com.
That's great. And folks, we did say this was going to be short and sweet, and I really do think we compacted a lot of valuable information for you to take away. So I want to remind you to go to the Encore Healthcare website, right, and get a hold of Zach, get a hold of Ray, talk to them directly about PAP 360 and how this can absolutely move your business and create a solution for those patients that are out there right now that might be backlogged inside of your business. So on behalf of both Zach and Ray, this is Coach Ty. Thanks for making the time to be with us today. We will look forward to our next encounter.